My voice is really bad. I, I don't know. I was sick a couple weeks ago, and I guess this is my voice now. So here we are. Um, but anyway, so the next hour, we are going to have a panel from our Crime Victims Council from the district rights chairs, and we're really excited to hear them. And I know they're just joining us now. Before we do that, we did want to talk briefly about our Crime Victim Service Awards. These are a part of our Crime Victims Conference, which is put on by the Crime Victims Council. It's like, how many times can I say crime victims in one sentence? You guys should have a drinking game in here. Actually, you can't in here, or else I'd get in trouble for that. But so I did want to talk briefly about our Crime Victim Service Awards. And I am going to share my screen and we're going to see if this works. Oh, yes, it can. Oh, yes. So Vicky is going to put the link in the chat um, for, oh, here it is. Yeah. Share. Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. That's not the one I wanted. The one I wanted is next to it. Okay, so she's got the link in the chat there. No, it's not letting me change my tabs. Why don't you go ahead and share it, Vicky, from your end? Because I'm trying to switch tabs, not letting me. So our Crime Victim Service Awards, many of you guys have seen them at our Crime Victims Conference, and we have several different categories that we give out awards for. And this year we're doing it, gosh, it's so bad, my voice. This year we're doing it a little bit differently in that before it was kind of, you had to submit a whole nomination packet with, it was like a 5-paragraph essay and whatever else. And I think that deterred a lot of people from wanting to submit awards. And so this year it is short and then it's like a 2-step process. So that way we're hoping to get more nominations and then we'll take those nominations and follow up with the nominators for those who pass that step. So Vicki, if you can go ahead and click on that link that says view the award category descriptions here. Yeah. And so we have, I believe, 6 different awards categories. The Laura Blanchard Advocacy and Action Award. I won't go ahead and read them all, but this one is generally more for victim advocates, system-based, community-based. And we get a lot of nominations for these, so please go ahead and submit them. But no, we've got a lot there too, and because there's so many great people like you guys doing great things. But that's for victim advocates doing great stuff. The Crime Victim Service Award is geared a little bit more towards law enforcement, criminal justice professionals. I know a lot of you guys work directly with law enforcement, and so think of some great people who have received that award in the past. We've seen detectives, we've seen whole investigation teams, we've seen even, patrol officers and chiefs, who are just doing great stuff for crime victims. And so really think about them. Public policy is a really neat category. This is a little bit probably more vague, but the idea is somebody who really shapes, policy, obviously, and change for crime victims. Last year, the person that received it was someone working in the Department of Public Safety. She's usually a little bit more behind the scenes, but she really helped develop a lot of the data keeping for victim services in the LAP program and things like that. And she's phenomenal. And so thinking about people like that, I might be doing that. We also have a Legislator of the Year award. So that's kind of, self-explanatory, but we can usually see people who have been doing great work in the legislature. Prosecutor of the Year, once again, a little bit self-explanatory, but that could be any prosecutor, county, city, even state level that is doing some fantastic work for crime victims. And then the Mel Wilson Lifetime Achievement Award. This is a big one, but it's a really great award. It's someone that you really have seen who's in any service profession that has dedicated their life towards crime victims and all of that work. Can you go back to the form, Vicki? Okay. So this short form, as you'll see here, I mean, honestly, you guys can do it in the next 10 or 15 minutes. I'm not saying you have to, because obviously give it some thought, but it is so straightforward. It's really, you're just kind of submitting someone's name, their agency, and then a short paragraph about why they're so great. And if your nominee is selected, we will be contacting you to say, hey, they're in the final stage. Can you give us some more information? So, please take a look at that if you guys can in the next week or so. The nomination deadline, I believe, Maddie, do you remember off the top of your head? Thank you, January 10th. And we'd like to strongly encourage that you guys can each think of somebody for those award categories who could qualify for that. Okay, so let's go back to, okay, thank you. The next thing that we want to talk about is going to go right into the presentation that we're just about to do. And we have some exciting news, and you guys are the first ones that get to see it. So that's kind of fun. But we have finally entered into this century, and we have made our crime victim complaint form online. Yay! It's only taken us like 20 years to do that. It was just this morning. Our reparations form, maybe next century, will also be online. Dale's working on that. We're not exactly up to date here, but so if you guys go into and if Maddie or Vicky, you're welcome to put this link into the chat. But on our victims' rights page on our website, you'll see all of the information about victims' rights. You'll see our victims' rights chairs who are with us today, and we'll be talking in just a minute. But then you'll also see how to fill out a victim and witness complaint form. And I know many of you guys work with victims who might do that. And so you'll just click on this little link there. And here it is. Yay. This has been a long time going. And I love our attorneys here. Oh, Donna's gone, so maybe I can see some attorneys. We have a lot of attorneys who looked at this, and it took a long time for them to all determine what they wanted it to say. And I realized it takes a lot of my patience, but they're here. So yeah, basic information again, contact, it's kind of basically, it's similar to the reparations application. We're just gonna ask for basic information, location of the crime, police report if they know it, agencies, court information. And then the important part here, and Hildy or anybody else feel free to jump in, is if you're helping them fill out this new form or any form, to help them identify which victims' rights have been violated. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit too, because as we are all aware, and as our presentation just talked about, there are a lot of just really crappy things that happen to victims in the criminal justice system, and it's really bad and terrible, and so it's really important to be able to educate yourselves on the specific types of rights, because as was just talked about, hey, I was not notified that my personal information was going to be released to the defendant, as Donna just brought up, that's a victim right that was violated, and that would be something to bring in there. So the more you can help them to be clear about this is a specific right that was violated, instead of just like, hey, I was treated like crap, which probably could be true, but the more you can help them with that. And in this box, it will talk about the list of all of the victims' rights that there are out there. And there are more than even I thought of, it was quite an event to look through all of those. That's probably going to be the key part of all of this. And then you can talk about the criminal justice agencies, what outcome is desired, et cetera. And then the statement of their complaint and a little bit more information if they can, to try to be detailed and succinct about what happened. They can upload any attachments or files, maybe they have a police report or something or whatever that might be, it's fine. They can e-sign that and date it and submit it. And it goes to us first, it goes to Hildy, and then she directs it to the victims' rights chairs who are on the call today. And they can get that, they'll get a confirmation of it being submitted. You guys, if you want, you can go in and test it, test it, just make sure you put in there. This is not a real complaint. This is just, I wanted to see what this would look like, because then you will get an auto reply email and some contact information that comes with resources.
So I was just going to add in the form. So you'll see there's a little different questions, and they were in the original form, and they're no longer. So for example, gender, to me, that was not, oh, sorry, hold it down. Okay, sorry. Mike, I'm not a singer. You don't want me singing. But so we did not include gender in there because it doesn't matter. There is questions in regards to the abuse, of his child abuse, sexual abuse. Um, Also in there, it has all the counties. A lot of times individuals don't know the county. They'll put in their United States, they'll put the city, and as okay. So hopefully this will guide individuals. With that, if the attachments are longer, I have received up to 80 pages of attachments, okay? And that's fine. The system will only accept to so much. It will tell in there that it notifies them if they have received up to the max when it comes to attachments, and then it will provide my email. And so then they can send that to me and I'll send that to the chairs, okay? But it's really we were trying to make it friendly in a way that individuals can fill it out, that the questions are, I think that it is very empowering when someone has a list of their rights to be able to look and see what their rights were violated, to see if it is something that can guide them, right? We don't want to make them experts or anything, but just to provide that support and provide that education. I think it is. So even if they read that and they still put something else in the other box, in the box in there, that's okay. But we want people to know that maybe this is not a right, but so maybe there's other support that we can provide to them. So, but but I'm excited because it's online and no more paper. So, okay. Any questions? Get on the floor. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So with no further ado, let's move on to our panel. We do have our district victims' rights chairs here online. And if you guys are here and don't mind, there we go. Yeah, jumping on camera. That way we can see your all beautiful faces. Yeah, I'm seeing some of you come on. Looking good, looking good. Okay. For the next little bit, we are going to be talking to each of our victims' rights chairs. This is one of the really exciting things about being able to be online too, is that people are joining us from all over the state, and it's quite easy to do so. So what we're going to do first, before we kind of jump into more question and answers, is we're going to have each of them introduce themselves, give a little bit of their background, what got them into this work. And by the way, a lot of these guys have some great backgrounds and interesting stories. And then also, if you guys don't mind sharing like your why, why do we do this? Why is this such an important issue for you, for victim services? And the best way we're going to do this is we're going to start from the first district down to the 8th. So first district is Blair, then Reed, then Yvette, then Sandy for 4th district. Let's see how good I am with this. 5th district, I'm not seeing her on yet, but we will come back to that. But is 6th, Dina's 7th, and Lindsay's 8th. I feel like that was a trivia I just got. So yeah, so Blair, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, so my name is Blair Wardle. I'm the Chief Deputy Attorney at the Box Elder County Attorney's Office. I've been working here for my entire career, which is a little over 11 years. And let's see, I just got put in the chair just a few months ago. What else? Sorry, I'm terrible. What else did you ask us to talk about?
Your why.
Oh gosh, when I first got into prosecution, I just thought it was like interesting, the philosophy of it, whatever. But I quickly started taking on initially some domestic violence cases in the justice court and got pretty passionate about that. And then moved to the district court and started taking on the sexual abuse cases. And I've often looked back on that and thought, why have I gotten so I guess passionate or enthused with those cases in particular? And I think it's because I just hate the idea of the injustice of it, that there is somebody being taken advantage of. And if I don't, do something about it, that there's just this injustice in the world that is not righted. So I know that kind of sounds a little bit cliche, but it just bugs me. There's just something about it that just does not resonate with me. And so I just want to make sure that when it comes to victims, that this is the only recourse oftentimes. And I find a lot of, I guess, satisfaction and being able to bring, you can never undo what's been done, but bringing some semblance of justice for them and trying to right that ship and right that wrong in the world to some extent. Even if it's just a sliver of it. So I think that's what's kind of fueled me as far as being, I guess, enthused or engaged with those type of offenses.
Thank you, Blair. Let's move on to Reed.
Okay, my name's Reed Richards. I'm an attorney in Ogden. I've been a prosecuting attorney for many years. I'm more retired than not now, thankfully. But I've been the county attorney in Weber County. I was the chief deputy attorney general for a number of years. I got involved in victims' rights issues, I guess, very soon after I became a prosecutor. And that really was from meeting with some of the folks that had been injured in a variety of different types of cases. And it really occurred to me then, and still does, that for a long time we've gauged the justice system towards going after perpetrators and punishing them for what they did. And that always is part of the system, but maybe a more important part is to try to help those that are injured, the victims, to recover from whatever they've been through. And so for a number of years, I've worked with the State Council on Victims of Crime and with the Children's Justice Centers to try to make the experience of going through court a little less traumatic and to provide resources so that they can recover. And so this is part of that, trying to take care of those who aren't getting those services. One of the ways we find out that laws need to be changed would be from finding things that aren't working well. And to listen to victims and problems that they've had in the system is often the guiding light, I think, in helping us decide what changes need to be made. We've made a lot of changes. The laws are pretty good, but maybe our education of those in the system as to what those rules are and what things should be done has not been done as well as it could have been. So anyway, that's the effort, I think, that we do through these district rights committees.
Thank you, Reed. Yvette.
Good morning. I'm Yvette Rodier. I'm the 3rd District Rights Chair. I'm also the Assistant City Prosecutor at West Valley City. I started being interested in victims' rights probably, over 2 decades ago with a personal experience. And then I was able to work with Judge Paul Cassell in 2002, and I was his judicial assistant. I was a horrible judicial assistant, but he was very kind, and I got to kind of help him while he was working as a professor, also part-time, which now he's doing full-time. But I was so interested in victims' rights and how it was a process of the criminal justice system, how it was a part of it. So I went to law school and graduated, and then Heidi Nestel was kind enough to hire me and take me under her wings and taught me so much about victims' rights. And I was able to be an attorney for her office for 4 years, I think. And then I also worked as the victim witness coordinator at the U.S. Attorney's Office, so doing some federal victims' rights issues. And then I've been at West Valley doing prosecution, and it's my passion. I absolutely love it. One of the whys that I have is a sweet little kid who his parents had so many domestic violence cases. And this is right when I started prosecuting, so 9 years ago. And I put his picture on my wall, and I just hoped they would stop and be able to not commit these acts of violence in front of him, because I was hoping he would be the one that would be able to break through, and not him, but his parents, really. But I recently found out that he's in the juvenile justice system now, and the way that domestic violence perpetuates through families, hopefully we can get them the help they need at the misdemeanor level. And that's one thing I'm really proud about working in misdemeanors. I do think there's hopefully some change that can be made for individuals. So that little guy, his name's Ernesto. He's my why. I still have a lot of hope for him and a lot of our victims and their families. But I'm also really passionate about the things that we get to do on the Victims Council. And these crime victims complaints are so important. And I echo what Reed said. It's the way that laws are changed, and things get better in the future. So these complaints are so important, and they make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you, Yvette. Sandy?
My name is Sandy Johnson. I'm currently the Senior Legislative Policy Counsel for RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest, and Incest National Network. I just started that recently, about the same time I was asked to be the chair of 4th District. So it's been a little busy. Before that, I've been a prosecutor for 20 years. I spent about 17 or 18 years in 3rd District at Salt Lake County. And then I moved down to Utah County, where I was the chief deputy for a little while. I've always wanted to be a prosecutor. I went to law school specifically to be a prosecutor. And I think probably where I started to really pay attention to victims is, I'm going to echo, Blair, Reed, Yvette. We all care about our communities. We all care about victims, but I'm going to take it from a little slightly different perspective in that I really want to throw the bad guys in jail. And I learned really fast you can't do that without victims. And, I started off in the juvenile department, which they give you some of the most awful sex abuse cases happen in juvenile courts. They never tell you that. So they stick the newbies into juvenile court. And I quickly realized I did not know what I was doing. And so my victim witness counselors came to my rescue, and I was just like, tell me everything I need to know about victims. Like, how does this work? What do I need to do? How do I talk to them? And that just continued. And then, shout out to all the victim witness counselors at Salt Lake County who taught me how to be a better prosecutor. And Heidi Nestel, who I believe is on this call, has taught us all about how much victims matter and how to protect victims and how to help victims. And I really hope that we all listen. And I've learned from her, and it's just continued and it's evolved. I mean, that's one of the things that I just find is so great about what we do is that, from when I started, nobody ever said the word trauma or trauma informed or trauma victim-centered interviewing or anything like that. And just to watch and to be part of that, to look back at what I did, 10 years ago and just shake my head and think, oh my gosh, I was terrible at what I did, like how we talk to victims. And so just trying to learn how to do everything better, because at the end of the day, they're the only way we can get to what we're trying to get to, which is to put the bad guys away and make sure that it doesn't happen to them again. Because we can never put victims back into the place they were before the crime happened to them. So it's make them feel heard, make them feel part of the process. So it can be as good of an experience as possible. And through that, hopefully get it so that you can do whatever the best outcome. And then as I've matured as a person and as a prosecutor, realizing that that's not always putting the bad guy in jail or in prison, right? It's listening to the victim about what is going to be best, and sometimes having to disagree, but to listen instead of just always thinking that throwing somebody in jail is the best answer. It's really to instead of trying to convince them of what's best for them, to listen to them about what's best for them. So becoming the chair is ultimately that, right? It's listening to victims and saying, where have we screwed up and where can we do better? Because that's what I'm all about. Is I have no problem admitting when I've messed up, as long as I'm going to try to get better, because we've all made mistakes, and anybody who tells me they haven't, I instantly distrust them. We've all made mistakes. We've all done things that we wish we could have done better. And I just want to keep getting better in the criminal justice system. That's all.
Thanks, Sandy. Our 5th District Chair, I think, might be joining us a little bit later. Her name is Susan Hunt. And she has spent a long history as well in a prosecutor. And right now she is actually teaching criminal justice at Utah Tech University. So we are going to go to Bud.
Yeah, I'm Bud Powell. Recently was stepped into the role in the 6th District as the Victim Rights Chair. Currently, we don't have a committee. I'm in the process of working on creating that committee with the intent. I know our district doesn't get a lot of complaints. Part of what we're going to also do is take over, hopefully lift some weight off of Yvette's shoulders a little bit and her committee, and take over the conflict cases that might arise from the 4th district. So pretty new to the role. I'm somewhat familiar with SWAVO from my time as a prosecutor for Provo City under Steve Schreiner. I remember him talking about SWAVO and the Victim Rights Committee and different things, but I didn't get super involved. So let me give you a little bit of my background. My first career was in law enforcement. I was a police officer for 7 years. And as we talk about the criminal court room, the criminal process, I fortunately or unfortunately, I've been on every side of the court system. And that's part of my why. I remember as a young teenager, made some stupid mistakes. And someone who I look up to has affected my life immensely was the prosecutor, Sherry Reagan. She is phenomenal. And she changed my life. And she, so I'm super grateful for her. But so that's what got me into this idea of I want to be in law enforcement. I want to help better my community, was my interaction with her. So first career was law enforcement. Did that for 7 years before I went to law school. I've been out of law school now for too many years, 14 years. My first year and a half, I was a law clerk in the 4th district for Judge Donald J. Eyre. After that, I prosecuted for Provo City and for Pleasant Grove City for a number of years. And then in the last 5 years, I kind of took another shift in my role. Wanted to get my family off the Wasatch Front, and took a position as an assistant attorney general representing DCFS in child welfare cases down here in the 6th district. And then a little over 2 years ago, I moved over to the guardian ad litem's office. Best move of my life. I absolutely love, I learned early as in law enforcement and throughout my career that I'm a social worker at heart. I believe in people. I believe people can change. And I truly believe in our system. I think it's the best in the world. It can improve, but I think that that takes us to make that improve. But I love working with the kids who are, I mean, as Yvette said, they're my why. I have pictures of kids that I have represented. I absolutely adore and love them. In law school, you write, and I can't remember the name right now, but you write a huge paper, kind of a dissertation of sorts. Mine was on domestic violence and calling out that the true victims of domestic violence are the kids. So really my why goes way back and has been not only my why for wanting to be involved here, but my why for my entire career. I think that's everything.
Thank you. We're going to go over to 7th district, which is Dina.
Yeah, my name is Dina and I'm with Carbon County Sheriff's Office. I'm a victims advocate. I have been here for 16 years. I've been a chair for 14 years. A little bit of background about me is before that, I used to work in the medical field for years. I decided that I was interested in law enforcement. My father was in law enforcement when I was younger, and I've always had a desire to get into law and just kind of learn about it. So a position come opening as a victims advocate, and so I applied and I got it. When I started, I knew absolutely nothing about the law, very little. I had a wonderful prosecutor that took my hand and taught me everything that I needed to know about it. He worked with me, educated me and everything, and then I started working with victims. As I started working with victims, I gained a passion working with them, being able to help them through the process, helping them heal, watching them, give them resources, and just helping them was very important to me. And the outcome, trying to be a part of that, was it helped, or actually I enjoy helping them. I was interested in victims' rights. Excuse me, I was interested in victims' rights when I started working with victims. I think victims' rights is really important. Victims need to be heard. They do make a difference, and I feel like they need to be upheld. Thanks.
Okay, and last, definitely not least, we have Lindsay.
Really regret being in the 8th district right now, because listening to all you guys is, I'm realizing that me and Dina are the only ones that aren't attorneys on this whole thing. So that's a little intimidating. So I've only been interested in victims' rights or in the field for about 2.5 years. I came from the mental health field, which is not too much different, but it gave me a really good understanding of the trauma-informed approach. And that approach has honestly given me my why. When victims come, and we all know that a lot of times victims are a hard population, but it's not their fault. And sometimes it's their abusers, and sometimes it stems from their childhood. But they deserve all the respect in the world, and we can't give them much, but we can give them their few rights. And when their rights aren't upheld, that's a sad thing, because that's all we can give them. So it's important to me that we work together to try to uphold those and treat them with respect and dignity, and let them have as much of a voice as they can have, which is not near enough, but it's what we can give them. So that's me.
Okay, and Lindsay, don't worry about not being an attorney. You're in good company with a lot of advocates here too. Okay, so many of our victims' rights chairs are new-ish, and so not obviously not new to the field, but new to their being a district rights chair. So some of these questions you guys might not all have the answers to just yet, and that's okay. You don't all have to answer, or just chime in as you would like. But the first question is, what does the victims' rights complaint process look like on your end once you get the complaint?
I guess I'll go. I've had the most, probably, at least recently, although I know Reed has probably done the very most overall. From my perspective, I get an email from Hildy, and it has the crime victim complaint attached, and I feel like we're a safe place here. I will just tell you that that email causes my heart to jump. I often don't check it for a couple of days, which is not helpful for the victim. But I kind of go into a trauma mode when I get that email, not because of anything Hildy does. She helps so much. But just because I know that it means something's starting, something extra, and we've got complaints going on right now. So it's not that I'm not constantly thinking about these. But it's also a reminder to me that there are things out there that are going on that I can hopefully help or try to help. But I definitely, on my end, when I first get the complaint, and I don't tell that to many people, but it does make me nervous. What I do is I review it first. I try to see if there's something that I can just do with a phone call, or maybe let them know maybe they need a referral, or they just haven't talked to the right person. I want to make sure that they've talked to victim advocates like you all, or if it's a legal clinic issue. And I email them to let them know that I received it. And then if it isn't something I can handle just on my own or with some referrals, then I email it to my committee. We do a lot of just kind of chatting that way about, do we need a formal meeting? Do we need to have the victim come speak with us? Are these phone calls? We kind of do those behind the scenes. And then we're required to meet twice a year, but my committee probably ends up meeting 4 to 6 times a year. And then we decide if we do want the victim to come in and speak, or maybe the victim doesn't want to speak to us, or if we need to speak with prosecutors, or if we need to speak with police officers or things like that. So it's handy to have people on our committee that the statute requires because they have the connection. So oftentimes, like if it's a law enforcement issue that we're concerned about victims' rights, we'll have the chief of police reach out to that agency. That's going a little bit farther, but that's how the process starts on our end. And then it ends with a formal letter of what we decided and what things are going to move forward on.
Thank you, Yvette. And yes, as many of you know, 3rd District is Salt Lake and Tooele and Summit counties. It's obviously by far the busiest county. More than, I would actually probably definitely say more than half, if not 3/4 of the complaints of the entire state just come to 3rd District, and then the other 25 to 50% is spread out among the other districts. So it does keep Yvette busy more than some of the other districts, and she is just fantastic and wonderful, and the way she does all of that too. Okay, who is on, and this is for everybody, who is on your Victims' Rights Committee? And we could talk about like who has to be on there, but then also who, sometimes I know you all have some extra people on there that help as well.
Well, I can start on that one, maybe. I think the statute outlines who they recommend be on the committee. You need to have a sheriff, you need to have a police chief, you need to have a city attorney and a county attorney. You need to have somebody from corrections. And then I think it's good to supplement it, certainly with some victim advocates, because they're extremely helpful, and with just people that have worked in the system for a while. I think it would be a good idea, if they're available, to get somebody from the administrative office of the courts for your district, because some of the complaints are going to relate to judges and to things that happen in the courtroom. I think there's really a lot of flexibility in filling out that committee with others that you think might be helpful, and you certainly want to do that. One of the advantages of having people like a police chief and a sheriff and a prosecutor is that often the complaints are ones that are not necessarily victims' rights complaints. They don't say that they weren't given notice, they weren't allowed to go to the preliminary hearing, or that they were violated in some other right. A lot of times they're mistaking victims' rights with system rights. They're unhappy that the investigation hasn't gone the way they felt it should. They may be unhappy that the prosecutor did not file charges. I had one last year where they were unhappy with the decision made by the judge. Well, those are not cases really that we can handle as victims' rights violations, but you can refer that to the agency involved, and hopefully they can resolve some of those problems. We had one last year, as I recall, that was unhappy that their case had not been filed and prosecuted the way they felt it should. And so the solution really was to arrange for that person to sit down with the prosecutor and get a full explanation of what happened, which hadn't happened before. And that may have not solved all their problems, but at least it let them understand what the problems were. And I think that's an important part of it. If the case is not filed by a prosecutor, there should be some sit down with that victim to explain to them why it wasn't filed and what the problems with the case might be. Sometimes that doesn't happen very well. And if you can facilitate that type of interchange, I think you solve many of the problems without having to go much of anywhere further.
Thank you, Reed. And I really think you hit on some good points there that, you know, victims have obviously been through enough. And so then if they're making a complaint, something else has happened on top of that. And there might be some different remedies to that. It might be through the victims' rights complaint process. It might be something else. But I can pretty much feel safe to say that if one thing that's common among all of the complaints is they want something to change. They want something to be better than what had happened to them, you know. And so it could just be, you know, maybe they do just want to be heard and listened to, or they could say, hey, this wasn't right and this needs to change. And so our big hope of having everybody come out and listen to their individual district rights chair is so that you can kind of get to know them better. We do have a handout that's in your folder that has their emails and their contact information. So reach out to them. go out to lunch or if you want, or whatever you might want to do, because developing those relationships can really be helpful so that they can get to know you better and some of the advocacy issues that you're facing. Because then if you have somebody in there that's having a difficult time and you're thinking, is this a victim's rights violation? You know, feel free to call up your district rights chair if you would like, even before you have that complaint, and say, hey, we have somebody here. They're thinking about filling out a complaint. Could you give us some advice or the best way to go forward? And that could also help it. As Reed said, sometimes it might be a specific complaint, but there needs to be some things. And sometimes there's just some creativity of things that need to happen. I know of one last year that is a victim that went in for some help on a protective order and talked to an advocate who was just not mostly very attentive and helpful to her. And that was really difficult and scary for this victim as she needed some help with a protective order. And so I know that we were able to contact that law enforcement agency and come to some solutions, and that victim was able to get some help with another advocate too. So sometimes it might just be some straightforward things, but they want something to change, want something to be better.
Let me add something to that, Tally, if I could.
Uh-huh.
I think it's really important for the victim advocates in a particular jurisdiction to interact with the district rights chair. Because a lot of times, certainly in the beginning phases of looking at a complaint, a lot of the solution can come through just having a victim's service provider, a victim advocate, interact with the person making the complaint and try to solve whatever that problem is right up front. And that's really, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a big meeting and embarrass everyone. Sometimes you can solve it with just a little help from the victim advocate. I've used Lisa Frazier in Weber County a number of times, and she does a great job of interacting with those people that are complaining, and in many cases has been able to solve the problem without really having to do anything else. So that's an important liaison, I think, that needs to take place.
Absolutely. You know, having these conversations and getting to know that there's people, there is just people on the other side of the email, people on the other side of the phone. So we feel frustrated, but get to know them as people, and we can definitely hopefully come to some solutions. And actually that leads to my next question is, what are some solutions? We kind of talked about this already, but if there's others, what are some of the outcomes that you've seen from this process?
I think Reed has seen through the years how there have been laws that the Victims Council has put forward to the legislature, or bills, proposals that have come out of complaints. There have also been, I believe, a couple of Supreme Court cases in Utah that have been important, and the council has participated in, that maybe didn't come through complaints, but definitely the issues that we're learning about and that we're wanting to make changes, they start from you victim advocates. That's where we hear all of it. So you really are the way that we're able to hopefully try to make changes. Recently, in a lot of my complaints, there hasn't been anything grandiose that has come from mine recently, except for one of them is something that we've wanted to talk with victim advocates, and I think it made it on a SWAVO agenda at one point, but that victims' contact information was not being shared with the Utah Department of Corrections. And that was, we were not able to figure out where that was coming from, how come that just wasn't making it. And it was more specifically victims. So let's say there's 3 sexual assaults of 3 different women, and only the defendant pleads to 1 count, and then 2 are dismissed. Well, those 2 other victims are still victims. But those, it's their contact information that wasn't making it to the Board of Pardons, at least in the case that came to us. And so we were able to work with, so my victim, or excuse me, my Department of Corrections person on my committee is Doug Fossen. So he was able to connect us there. We were able to kind of see where we're dropping the ball. It might be at the attorney's offices, at prosecutors' offices, that we're not including that information. But I think we're trying to make a more assertive effort to be sure that we are sharing that contact information, because they want to be kept informed, and they should. And it was an oversight. And so those victims that the complaint was filed for, they didn't get any remedy for themselves. Nothing changed for them. It was a horrible process, and I felt, everybody felt bad. No one did this on purpose, but it definitely, they didn't get a change. But something moving forward, hopefully we are all doing better. And one of the things was that we told the victim and her family that we would be sharing this information with SWAVO, and that wanting to be sure that all victims in a case are shared, that information goes forward to the Board of Pardons. So that's one recently that many of our victims don't get anything for themselves, but the process becomes better for everyone in the future. So that's an example of one resolution.
And that's really an important point. Pretty much all of the major victims changes that have taken place over the years, victims' rights changes, have come up because of a particular case. The fact that the victims now get to sit in on the entire trial and the preliminary hearing and are not excluded as a witness came up because victims complained about the process of not being included as part of the trial process. And so that change was made. The fact that they weren't notified of a bail hearing instigated the change that they have to now be notified of all major criminal justice proceedings if they're charged with a serious crime. So that really is important. That and those people, of course, didn't get any benefit, just like Yvette said. They didn't go back and redo a hearing that they could sit in on, but it made a huge difference in what's happened since. And that really is maybe something to explain to a victim filing a complaint at the very beginning, that we probably can't go back and change what happened to you. Sometimes you can, but more often than not, you can't. But hopefully the things that we get from your experience will help others in the future. That's a very important point.
Absolutely, and you might hear this, and you guys probably already hear this anyway. With victims' rights, people love to say, well, we do have the defendant's rights, and those are in the Constitution. And it is tricky, but more often than not, these victims' rights are not going to override any defendant's rights. That these are something that the victims do deserve. But what's probably the hardest part with this process, and it's just important to know and be realistic from the beginning, is there really are not a lot of specific formal sanctions. It's not like we're going to have somebody that's going to get fired or be able, or they can't practice law or anything like that anymore. That's really not the intent and the purpose of the victims' rights complaints. So I think it's important to keep that realistic for yourselves and for the victims in the beginning, is that more often the outcomes are going to be, like I said, having these conversations, bettering the processes, bettering the practices. But it's not quite the formal sanctions that one might think of that you would see like in a criminal justice process, or, when someone is like reviewed by DOPL or something like that. Okay, last question for you all on the panel. Now we have a question for everybody who's, attending. Is there anything else? I know we kind of covered this a little bit, but is there anything else that you guys would like victim advocates or those working with victims who might use the victims' rights complaint process? Is there anything else that you would like them to know?
One thing that I've found myself saying often, at least in the last couple of years, is trying to preempt it. These complaints take a while. And the reason they take a while is because everyone on the committees, everyone on the council, we all have full-time other jobs that are in the criminal justice system. And while we are doing volunteer work, and we are honored, and I feel privileged to be able to do this work, it definitely becomes a weekend job, at least for me. And then to try to get all of our committee to respond within a couple of weeks, that takes some time. And it's not because anyone is purposely delaying these things, except that tiny bit when I don't open the email, but I promise I'm getting better. But after that, we're not delaying it on purpose, but we do have full-time jobs that we have, and we also have families. and lives. And so I guess if I've been trying to let victims know in advance that this might be a few months. This isn't going to be something that we're going to be calling you right back tomorrow. So if they have that expectation that it's probably a few months before there's a resolution, and sometimes they might just be done in a week or two, but for some bigger ones, it is a longer process. And I guess I would just want to have that out there. Not that we're wanting to delay this, but we're humans doing our best.
One other issue that we might talk a bit about, sometimes we get a case, in fact, often we get a case that is the objection or the complaint is about one of the participants on our committee, not necessarily that person individually, but their agency. And that has a kind of a mixed result. One solution could be just to have that person not participate in the discussion, but more frequently it's not the actual person on the committee who usually is the head of the department, the sheriff or the police chief or the prosecutor. It's usually somebody working under them. And often I found it to be pretty helpful actually to have the head of the agency hear what the complaint is. And a lot of times those complaints are remedied and the solution comes just because they've heard from the victim and they're able to go back and make changes in their agency or their department. So each case you have to look at. If it actually is a complaint against that person, then maybe you don't have them participate. But if it's against their agency, there are some advantages in keeping them in on the discussion. Would you agree, Yvette?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things can happen kind of behind the scenes, and changes can be made that way too. But yeah, Reed, that's a great point.
Okay, and Yvette, don't worry, there are plenty of emails that I don't answer right away as well. And I think we all get those feelings like, oh, I don't want to open that one. So it's okay.
Thanks.
Okay, and the last question is for those who are participating today, either in the room or online. Do you have any questions or comments or anything else that you would like the victims' rights chairs to know from your end and side of things? You can put them in the chat too if you'd like as well.
Is it anonymous or are their names attached to?
Okay, the question was, is if it can be anonymous or are the names attached to the complaints?
I've actually, I don't know that I've had that question before. That's a really good question. I know the form requires a name, right? Especially the online form. I think we put
Yes, it does.
asterisks on the form. But I don't know that I would ever be opposed to receiving one that was anonymous. But I guess if it was anonymous, we wouldn't be able to contact that person back and let them know what changes were made or if any changes were made or what the process was. But I don't know that I would, I don't see why I wouldn't investigate an anonymous complaint. I don't know. Do any other chairs have an idea about that? Or maybe you've had one. I just haven't had one.
I've never had one.
I've never had one either.
Yeah, like we've had before.
It would be hard to imagine how it could be an anonymous complaint because they're complaining about a particular thing that's happened in the system. And for you to look into it, you're going to have to look at that situation and that agency, and you're going to find out who it is. So I'm not sure how that would work.
And that kind of touches on another point too, is that, I mean, they could, and you know, we could look in, they could look into it, but it really would, also these complaints really should be coming if they've entered into the criminal justice system, so made a police report or something like that, because if it is a complaint from someone that's never entered into the criminal justice system, then there's not as much of a victim right that could be violated. So just making sure, you know, we're not here to deter, but you know, the last thing we want to do is send someone down a path that's just not going to work out for them. So would need to be someone in the criminal justice system. What you say?
The other thing I was going to add is just that we've had, when we did our regional listening sessions, multiple advocates in one county saying they've had an issue with a particular commissioner or judge. And so we were able to compile those all together. So it was different victims, but the victim advocate was able to send Amy Hernandez with the Administrative Office of the Courts those specific protective order hearings so she could pull recordings and things like that. So if you have that you're continually having maybe an issue with someone in the criminal justice process, but it's not tied to one specific victim, but you have multiple cases you could reference, you could reach out to Hildy or to the district right chair that's in your area. That was something that the district right chair was at our listening session, and he had a conversation with the judge that was over that commissioner to say, have you heard this? And they're like, no, we want to have more information. And so they were able to compile and have some education given to that commissioner to be more trauma informed and more, they approached and were kinder to the victims in their processes. So that's another option of maybe there's not the direct right, but you continually kind of have that maybe disrespect or that piece of the rights that you have concerns with. And Hildy, want to add something?
Oh, that was exactly what I wanted to add was in regards to the advocates. They are able to reach out to us and let us know, because I think it's important you all see the day to day. And so a lot of times individuals may not want to, they'll give me a call and I'll talk to the individual. And sometimes their decision after knowing that their name will be there, the information, they may choose not to file. But that said, that information is very important for us to be able to then make sure that we do some education or, check on those things. For example, we had a commissioner, it was a different one, that this individual, they complained and contact me and she says, my information is so that if the commissioner knows that I file a complaint, I'm afraid that my case, something's gonna happen to my case. So we talked for a long time. And then she told me what was happening, which was very alarming. And so I gathered all that information and then I contacted Amy Hernandez with the courts. And I know Cara was involved, B was involved, Beatrice. So we were able to how do we do some education to remind commissioners and judges about victims' rights and, all these things. So, and being trauma informed. And so now that's happening with the administrations of the courts. So she may not have filed, but with that information is still something that we can then move forward and do something about it. And that was very empowering for that individual. So.
Okay, any last minute questions or thoughts from anybody? I don't see any in the chat. Nothing in the chat. Okay, well, thank you so much for our Victims' Rights Chairs for taking the time. I know you are very busy, especially with court schedules, to be able to come here and spend some time with us. Once again, please do reach out to each other. We're happy to set up any kind of communication that you might need as well. But this is really only for the best of victims. And we are now going to go into our lunch hour. We will be back at 1 o'clock. If you are here in the room, I know that there's some restaurants over here around the corner or